She grew up in a small corner of the city where life always felt like a quiet struggle. The streets around her home were narrow, the buildings old, and the sounds from the traffic mixed with the chatter of people who were just trying to get through another day. She lived with her family in a tiny room at the back of a worn-out building. The walls were thin, the windows leaky, and yet she always found a strange kind of comfort there, as if the place understood her and held her dreams safely inside. Even though they had little, the warmth of her family's support made the toughest days feel softer. From a young age, she had an unusual connection with music. While other children played outside, she would sit quietly with an old keyboard that barely worked. A neighbor had given it to her after finding it in a storage box, thinking maybe she could use it as a toy. But for her, it was never a toy. It was a doorway into a world where she felt free and alive. Some of the keys didn't even press down properly, and the sound that came out was thin and broken. But she didn't care. Every day, she sat with it, pressing each key gently, closing her eyes, and pretending it was a grand piano in a bright hall. Her family would watch her and smile. They didn't really understand music, but they could feel something different whenever she played. Even the neighbors sometimes stopped by and listened from outside the door. They often said that she had a gift, though she never believed it. She only knew that when she touched the keys, she felt something deep and warm inside, like the world made sense for a moment. Money was always tight at home. Her parents worked long hours at different jobs, barely bringing in enough to cover rent and food. She wanted to help, so she took on small tasks wherever she could. Sometimes she helped a shopkeeper nearby by sweeping floors. Other times she carried groceries for an older lady who lived in the next building. She never earned much, but what she did earn she used to buy small things for the house or save for school supplies. Her world was simple, but she handled it with a quiet strength that people often noticed but rarely commented on. One day, a local music teacher happened to walk by while she was sitting outside with her old keyboard. The teacher heard her playing a tune that seemed far too graceful for such a broken instrument. Curious, the teacher slowed down and listened. After a moment, the teacher gently asked her where she had learned to play like that. She simply shrugged and said she learned on her own. The teacher smiled and asked if she wanted to come by the small music center after school. The center wasn't fancy, but it had a real piano. A piano with keys that responded, that produced real sound, that opened the heart with every note. She hesitated at first. She worried about the cost, about the expectations, about stepping into a place she didn't belong. But the teacher assured her it would cost nothing. They only wanted to see her grow. That night she couldn't sleep. The thought of touching a real piano filled her mind. She imagined how heavy the keys might feel, how rich the sound would be. She wondered if she would embarrass herself. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. The next afternoon, she walked to the music center. The building was small and old, but clean and organized. The teacher led her inside a quiet room where the piano waited like a gentle giant. She stood in front of it, frozen for a moment. The teacher nodded for her to sit. When she finally placed her fingers on the keys, she felt a shock run through her chest. The piano responded with a warm, full sound that made her heart flutter. She pressed another key, then another, and soon she was lost in the moment. The teacher watched her closely. There was something raw and emotional in the way she played, something that couldn't be taught from books. The teacher encouraged her to return every day after school. She did. Day after day, she came with excitement that outshined everything else in her life. She practiced happily, learning new melodies, discovering the beauty hidden in each key. Her confidence slowly grew, though she still struggled to believe she was good enough. Weeks turned into months, and she became a familiar face around the music center. Some of the other students admired her talent, even though she never tried to stand out. She wasn't loud, she wasn't boastful, and she carried herself with a quiet humility that made people naturally drawn to her. The teacher often recorded short clips of her playing to review her progress later. One day, without telling her, the teacher shared a clip on social media. It wasn't meant to be anything big, just a simple moment of a gifted girl playing from the heart. The clip didn't explode instantly. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, but those who stumbled upon it felt something real. Among those viewers was a well-known philanthropist connected to major cultural events in the city. This person rarely stopped to watch videos online, but something about the way the girl played made them pause. The music wasn't perfect in a technical sense, but the emotion behind it was so strong, so sincere, that it felt impossible to ignore. The philanthropist watched the clip twice, then 3 times. They wanted to know more about this quiet girl with the gentle hands and deep expression. After contacting the music center, they learned her background, where she came from, the challenges she faced, and how she practiced every day despite having almost nothing. They admired her determination and felt she deserved a chance to be seen. A few weeks later, an invitation letter arrived at the music center. It was handwritten, elegant, and surprising. The letter invited her to perform at the Millionaire's Gala, a prestigious event attended by influential people, artists, and leaders. The girl didn't even understand what the event was at first. When the teacher explained, her heart dropped. She laughed nervously, thinking it must be a mistake. She couldn't imagine stepping into that kind of world. She couldn't imagine wearing anything that matched such an event. She couldn't imagine herself standing in a hall filled with wealth and luxury. The teacher, however, insisted it wasn't a mistake. Someone out there had seen her potential. Someone believed she belonged on that stage, even if she didn't believe it herself yet. Her family was speechless when they heard the news. They hugged her tightly, amazed and proud, even though they worried she would feel out of place. They didn't have the means to prepare her for such an event, but they supported her with all the love they had. She spent the next few days in a strange mix of excitement and fear. She didn't know what she would wear, how she would behave, or what people there would think of her. She had never stepped foot into a place full of wealthy people. She had never been part of anything grand or luxurious. She was just a girl from a small home, with a simple family and simple dreams. Yet the invitation was real. And deep inside, she wondered if this could be the moment that changed everything. Not just for her, but for her entire family. The thought scared her, but it also lit a small spark of courage in her heart. A neighbor offered her a clean, modest dress. The teacher encouraged her every day, reminding her that talent doesn't belong to the rich or privileged. It belongs to those who carry it with honesty. Finally, with hands trembling and hope growing quietly inside her, she prepared herself for the night of the gala. She didn't know what awaited her there, but she knew she would walk into that hall with all the courage she had. The days after the invitation felt unreal to her. She often caught herself staring at the letter, wondering how a simple video of her playing the piano could travel so far and reach someone important enough to invite her to such a grand event. Every time she looked at it, her heart raced. She felt nervous, excited, confused, and scared all at once. For someone who had grown up with very little, opportunities like this felt like dreams that never came true. And yet, here she was, holding a piece of paper that seemed to change everything. Her family treated the letter as if it were made of gold. They placed it carefully on a shelf so it wouldn't get damaged. They read it again and again, smiling proudly each time. They didn't understand what the gala would be like, but they knew it meant something big. They knew someone powerful had noticed her talent, and that alone was enough to fill their small home with joy. But alongside the excitement, fear slowly crept into her thoughts. She wondered what people at the gala would think of her. She wondered whether she was really good enough to play at such an important event. She wondered how she would even walk into a room full of people who lived such different lives from her own. These thoughts kept her awake at night. Sometimes she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, telling herself that she would embarrass everyone. Other times, she imagined herself playing beautifully on a real grand piano under a huge spotlight. Her mind fought between hope and doubt every single day. The music teacher who had believed in her from the beginning noticed her growing worries. One afternoon, the teacher sat beside her in the quiet music room and gently asked what was troubling her. At first, she hesitated. She didn't want to seem ungrateful or weak. But the teacher had a calm way of making people feel safe, so she finally explained everything she was feeling. She talked about her fears, her doubts, and her confusion. She admitted that she didn't feel like she belonged at a gala filled with wealthy people. The teacher listened carefully and then spoke in a soft voice. They reminded her that talent doesn't belong to the rich or the poor. It belongs to the person who carries it with honesty. They told her that music has no boundaries. It doesn't favor one class over another. It simply flows from the heart, and if her heart was strong enough to guide her fingers, then she already belonged on any stage in the world. Those words comforted her, but the fear still didn't disappear completely. She had lived her entire life feeling small, unnoticed, and unsure. Changing that feeling overnight wasn't easy. Still, she tried her best to focus on her music. She spent more hours practicing at the music center than ever before. Every note she played felt like a step toward something new. She didn't know what would happen at the gala, but she knew she wanted to be ready. The teacher also helped her prepare in practical ways. They taught her how to walk onto a stage with confidence, how to sit at the piano, how to keep her hands steady even when her heart was racing. They played recordings of famous performers not so she could compare herself, but so she could understand that even the greatest artists started somewhere. She watched those videos with wide eyes, imagining herself in their place. Word spread around the neighborhood that she had been invited to a wealthy gala. Some people were amazed. Others couldn't believe it. Children from the nearby buildings asked her what it felt like. The adults smiled proudly when they saw her walking by. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not because of where she lived, but because of what she could do. Still, she worried about one thing she couldn't change easily: what she would wear. She had never owned anything fancy in her life. For events like school ceremonies, she always wore the same simple dress. The gala, she knew, would be filled with people wearing expensive clothes that sparkled under the lights. She felt embarrassed at the thought of arriving in something plain. Her family tried to help, but they didn't have the money to buy anything special. They searched through old clothes, hoping to find something suitable, but nothing seemed right. She didn't say it out loud, but she felt her heart sink a little deeper each time they held up another dress that didn't fit the occasion. Then one day, a neighbor heard about the problem and came to visit. She carried a neatly folded dress wrapped in thin paper. She said it wasn't new, but it was clean and simple and had been worn only a few times. She believed the girl would look beautiful in it. When she opened the paper, she found a soft dress in a gentle color. Nothing too flashy, nothing too dull. Just right for someone who wanted to look presentable without trying to impress anyone. She held the dress in her hands and felt a wave of gratitude. She didn't need anything expensive. She just wanted something that wouldn't make her feel out of place. And this dress felt perfect for her. Modest, soft, and comfortable. She thanked the neighbor again and again, feeling a warmth in her chest. This small act of kindness meant more than any expensive gift. As the day of the gala grew closer, the teacher encouraged her to play the piano with her eyes closed, letting her emotions guide the melody. The teacher told her that she wasn't going to the gala to compete or prove anything. She was simply going there to share her music. That thought lifted a little of the pressure she had placed on herself. She had always played from the heart, and she decided she would do the same at the event. Meanwhile, the philanthropist who had invited her was busy preparing for the gala. They didn't reveal to the public that a young girl from a struggling neighborhood would be performing. They wanted it to be a surprise. They believed that talent should shine on its own, without people forming opinions based on background or appearance. The night before the gala, she sat quietly at the edge of her bed, holding the dress in her hands. Her family gathered around her, giving her small pieces of advice. Some useful, some funny, all spoken with love. They told her to smile, to be brave, to trust herself. They hugged her tightly, making her feel like no matter what happened, she had already made them proud. That night she barely slept. Her mind kept replaying different scenes, walking into the hall, sitting at the piano, looking at the crowd. Sometimes the imagined audience clapped. Other times, in her fear, they stared silently. She tried to calm herself, telling her heart to slow down. She whispered small encouragements to herself, the way her teacher had taught her. When morning came, she felt a mix of anxiousness and hope. She prepared herself slowly. She brushed her hair carefully, wanting it to look neat. Her mother helped her with the dress, smoothing out the fabric and adjusting the straps. She stood in front of a small mirror and stared at her reflection. She looked different. Not wealthy, not glamorous, but confident in a quiet way. For the first time, she saw herself not just as a girl from a poor neighborhood, but as someone with a purpose. As she stepped outside with the teacher waiting to take her to the gala, she felt a soft breeze touch her face. It carried the familiar smells of her neighborhood, the food, the dust, the small shops, but somehow everything felt different. Felt like the world was opening a new door just for her. The ride to the venue was quiet. She looked out of the window, watching the streets change from narrow and crowded to clean and wide. Tall buildings rose around them, shining in the afternoon light. She felt smaller with each passing block, but she also felt something else growing inside her. Strength. She reminded herself of every long hour she had practiced, every challenge she had overcome, every dream she had whispered to herself late at night. When the car finally stopped in front of the large building where the gala was being held, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The entrance was grand, decorated with elegant lights and long carpets. People dressed in beautiful outfits were walking inside with confidence. For a moment, she wondered if she should step back. But then she remembered the piano waiting inside, and the music she carried within her. With slow but determined steps, she walked forward. She didn't know what the night would bring, but she knew she was ready to face it with honesty, courage, and the quiet strength that had carried her this far. The moment she stepped inside the grand building, the world around her changed completely. The sounds, the lights, the people. Everything felt different from anything she had ever known. The entrance hall was wide and glowing with warm golden lights. A huge chandelier hung from the ceiling, shining like stars trapped in glass. People in elegant clothes moved gracefully through the hall, talking softly and greeting each other with warm smiles. She watched them with quiet awe, feeling as if she had stepped into a different universe. Her teacher walked beside her, gently reminding her to breathe. Even with the teacher's calm presence, the pressure in her chest grew. She felt like everyone could see how out of place she was. She held her small purse tightly, wishing she could shrink into the background. Her dress was simple and soft, but she could see the difference when she looked around. The guests wore expensive gowns and suits that shimmered under the lights. They looked confident, sure of themselves, like they were born to be in such a place. She tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Everywhere she looked, she saw something new. The hall had tall mirrors, polished floors that reflected the lights, and walls decorated with paintings she didn't recognize. Waiters carried trays filled with tiny desserts and colorful drinks. She had never tasted anything like that before. She wasn't sure if she was allowed to take any, so she simply watched. Some guests glanced at her briefly. Their looks weren't unkind, but they carried curiosity and confusion. They probably wondered who she was, where she had come from, and how she had been invited to such an exclusive event. She lowered her eyes each time someone stared for too long, hoping they wouldn't judge her too harshly. She wanted to disappear, to hide behind her teacher, but she knew she had to stay strong. As they walked deeper into the venue, the music of a small live band floated through the air. The instruments blended together beautifully, creating a soft and calming atmosphere. She understood immediately why people loved events like this. Everything felt magical. Everything felt carefully made to impress. Yet for her, every step felt heavier. The closer she got to the main hall, the more she feared she would not belong here. Her teacher led her toward a quiet corner where she could observe without feeling overwhelmed. From there, she could see the main stage at the far end of the hall. A beautiful grand piano sat at the center, polished so perfectly that it seemed to glow. Her heart skipped at the sight of it. She wondered if that was the piano she would be playing later. Just imagining sitting at such a magnificent instrument made her stomach twist with both excitement and nervousness. As she stood silently, she noticed conversations happening around her. People laughed softly, exchanged greetings, and complimented each other's outfits. Some talked about business, some about travel, and others about art. Their voices blended with the music, creating a sound she had never heard before. A sound that felt expensive. The philanthropist who had invited her had not arrived yet, but the teacher assured her they would meet soon. She nodded, though part of her hoped she could stay hidden just a little longer. She was still trying to process everything. The lights, the people, the piano, the pressure. While she stood there, a couple approached her with friendly smiles. They complimented her dress, saying it had a gentle charm. She thanked them shyly, trying her best not to sound too nervous. They asked if she was performing tonight. When she nodded, their expressions brightened even more. They said they looked forward to hearing her play. Their kindness warmed her heart, even though she still felt unsure about everything else. More people slowly began to notice her. Some approached, while others simply watched from a distance. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Growing up, she had blended into the background. She wasn't popular or noticed. But here, her presence caught people's eyes, and it made her feel exposed. She reminded herself of the teacher's words. She had been invited because someone had believed in her talent. That thought helped her stay grounded. After a while, the philanthropist finally entered the hall. They were surrounded by several guests who greeted them with respect. Despite their important status, they had a warm and gentle expression. When they spotted her, their eyes lit up. They walked toward her with a genuine smile that instantly eased her nerves. They introduced themselves and spoke to her with kindness, not arrogance. They told her how much they admired her playing and how touched they had been by her music. She listened quietly, overwhelmed by the idea that someone so powerful had taken the time to notice her, let alone invite her to such a prestigious event. They assured her that she didn't need to impress anyone. She only needed to play with the same heart she always had. They said her story deserved to be heard, and her music deserved to be shared. Those words echoed inside her, slowly replacing some of her fear with courage. Soon, the host announced that the performances would begin shortly. The guests began to take their seats at the round tables arranged across the hall. The lights dimmed slightly, creating a soft glow that made the stage stand out even more. Her heart raced as she watched the guests settle into silence. She wasn't the first performer. The first few were well-known musicians, each playing beautiful pieces that filled the hall with elegance. Their fingers danced across the keys with confidence, and the audience clapped politely after each performance. She admired their skill but also felt her own anxiety growing. How could she follow musicians who had trained professionally and performed at many events like this? The teacher sensed her tension and whispered small encouragements beside her. They reminded her that she didn't need to compare herself to anyone. Her music came from a place of deep emotion and experience, something unique that made her special. Finally, she heard the host say her name. It echoed across the hall, quieting her breath. Her body froze for a moment, and she felt like she couldn't move. The teacher touched her shoulder gently, reminding her that she wasn't alone. With trembling steps, she stood up. As she walked toward the stage, she could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Some looked curious, others surprised. The path felt longer than it actually was. Her hands were cold, her legs unsteady, and her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if the audience could hear it. The hall grew silent as she reached the piano. She sat down carefully, her dress brushing lightly against the polished bench. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The piano felt smooth and warm beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the fear. She remembered her teacher's voice. Just play with your heart. She opened her eyes slowly and gazed at the keys. The lights above created a soft reflection on the polished surface. For a brief second, the hall around her disappeared. The voices, the stares, the fear, all faded. All that remained was the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys, ready to begin. She wasn't sure if her voice would shake if she spoke, so she stayed silent. She straightened her back, breathed in deeply, and let her thoughts melt away. She could feel a familiar warmth rising in her chest, the feeling she always had when she played alone at the music center. It reminded her of her family, her neighborhood, her struggles, and her dreams. It reminded her of every moment that had brought her to this stage. And as the hall waited silently, she pressed the first key. It felt like stepping into a new world, one where her music could finally speak for her. The minutes after her performance passed in a strange blur, like she was floating just above the ground. She could still feel the echo of the piano keys in her fingers, the soft vibration in her chest that came from playing something so close to her own heart. People were clapping, standing, turning their heads to look for her, but she wasn't used to this kind of attention. She moved quietly toward a far corner of the hall where she could breathe again, but even there she felt the warmth of countless eyes still trying to find her. The chandelier lights above her seemed brighter now, almost as if the room itself had shifted. Earlier, she had walked into the gala hoping no one would notice her second-hand dress or her simple shoes. Now she felt exposed in a new way, not because of what she lacked, but because of what she had suddenly shown. A small part of her wondered if she had done something wrong by playing the way she did. Another part of her, a part she had kept hidden for years, whispered that maybe she had finally done something right. A server passed by with a tray of drinks, and she thanked him softly, trying not to draw attention. But even he gave her a curious smile, the kind people gave when they recognized someone from a moment they didn't expect. As she stood there, trying to gather herself, she thought about how everything had begun that morning. She remembered waking up before the sun, tying her shoes with worn laces, and taking the long walk toward the city. She hadn't planned to end up here, in this hall full of wealthy guests in designer clothes. She only wanted to come close to the building, to hear the orchestra rehearse from outside, maybe catch a glimpse of the grand piano that she had dreamed of touching just once in her life. But then, on the steps outside, she had heard someone say they needed a volunteer to help carry sheet music and equipment inside. She had stepped forward because it felt like the only chance she would ever get to enter. She didn't expect anything else. She certainly didn't expect to be asked to sit at the piano. Still didn't feel real. Now the hall buzzed quietly around her. She could see groups of people whispering, pointing gently in her direction. Not in a rude way, but in a surprised way. This made her want to shrink into herself, but there was nowhere to go without walking past all of them. Someone approached her, a woman wearing a long silver gown. She carried herself with confidence, but her smile was warm, not sharp like some of the faces earlier. The girl's heart began beating faster when she saw the woman coming straight toward her. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "Are you the one who just played the piano?" The girl nodded, unsure what else to do. "That was beautiful," the woman continued. "I've been coming to these galas for years, and I've never heard anything like that." The girl felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to praise. "Thank you," she whispered. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The girl hesitated. She never knew how to explain her story without sounding embarrassed. She had no teacher. She had learned by sneaking into an old community center where a cracked piano sat in one of the empty rooms. She would go late at night, when no one else was there, and practice until she could barely keep her eyes open. "I just practiced whenever I could," she said simply. The woman seemed to understand that there was more to the story, but she didn't push. "Well, you have a gift. You should be very proud." Then, with a kind nod, she walked away. More people came after that, some offering compliments, some asking questions, some only wanting to shake her hand. Each one made her feel both grateful and overwhelmed at the same time. She smiled politely, answered what she could, and kept wondering when the moment would end. But then she noticed someone standing near the entrance of the hall. He wasn't dressed like the others. His clothes were simpler, more worn, the way hers were. He was watching her with an expression she recognized instantly. It was the expression of someone who knew her, someone who had seen her long before this night. It was the neighbor who lived next door to her small apartment. The same man who always fixed broken chairs or helped her mother carry groceries up the stairs. He had once told her that if she ever got a chance to follow her talent, she should take it, no matter how small the opportunity seemed. She felt her chest tighten. She walked toward him through the crowd, and when she reached him, he gave a soft smile. "I heard rumors someone from our street had shaken this whole place," he said kindly. "I didn't believe it until I saw you at the piano." She looked down, unsure how to respond. "You did something brave," he said gently. "Most people wouldn't even step inside, let alone play in front of them." "I wasn't supposed to," she said quietly. I only came to help with the music sheets. They asked me to play because someone didn't show up, I think. Sometimes chances arrive in strange ways, he replied. But you were the one who made something out of it. She breathed slowly, taking in his words. For the first time that night, the tension inside her loosened a little. She felt grounded again, like someone had gently placed her feet back on the floor. After a moment, he placed a hand on her shoulder. You should stay. Enjoy it. You earned this. Those words stayed with her even after he returned to the entrance and disappeared among the crowd. She stood quietly, thinking about everything that had happened tonight. She thought about all the days she had practiced in secret, the nights she had played until her fingers ached, the moments when she wondered if talent mattered at all when life felt too heavy. Now she was here, in a hall she had never imagined entering, surrounded by people who suddenly saw her in a way she had never seen herself. She took a slow breath and walked deeper into the hall. She accepted a small dessert from a passing table, even though she felt nervous eating in front of so many well-dressed guests. But something inside her whispered that this was a place she had the right to be, even if she still felt out of place. The night continued with music, speeches, and soft laughter echoing around the room. She watched the orchestra from afar, admiring each musician. She wondered if she would ever have the chance to play with a group like that. The thought felt impossible, but then again, so did everything that had happened tonight. As she stood near the back of the hall, she overheard two guests talking. One said the gala had never had a moment so unexpected and meaningful. The other said the girl who played had something rare, something that couldn't be taught in expensive schools. Hearing this made her eyes sting. She looked down and blinked a few times to steady herself. She didn't want anyone to see her crying, not after everything. Later, one of the event organizers approached her politely and asked if she would be willing to play again before the night ended. She felt her heartbeat quicken. She wondered if she could handle another performance, but then she thought about why she loved the piano in the first place. She played not for attention but because it made the world feel gentle, even when life was difficult. So she nodded. Are you sure? The organizer asked. Yes, she said quietly. I'll play. Minutes later, she found herself sitting at the piano again. The room fell quiet, softer than before, as if the audience already knew they were about to witness something delicate. This time she didn't feel fear. She felt calm. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she began to play, a piece she had created herself during one of her late-night sessions at the community center. It was simple, gentle, but full of emotion. It spoke of the small apartment she grew up in, the long walks she took to escape noise, the dreams she held quietly inside her heart. The music flowed through the room like a soft breeze. People leaned forward without realizing it. Some held their breath. Others closed their eyes to absorb the sound. When she finished, the hall stayed silent for a long second. Then applause rose again, this time deeper, more heartfelt. She lifted her head slowly, and even though the crowd blurred in her vision, she felt their appreciation like warm light. She didn't smile widely or wave her hands. She simply nodded, grateful in a quiet way. As she stepped off the stage, a small thought settled into her mind. A thought she had never allowed herself to consider before. Maybe this was only the beginning. And maybe, for the first time in her life, the path ahead wasn't something to fear but something to hope for. The hall remained silent long after the final note faded. She sat there, her hands still resting on the keys, breathing slowly as the sound dissolved into the air like a soft whisper. For a moment she didn't move. She didn't dare. She felt suspended between two worlds, the one she had always known and the one she had just stepped into with her music. The piano felt warm beneath her fingers, almost as if it were encouraging her to look up and face what she had created. When she finally lifted her eyes, she saw something she never expected. The entire hall was on its feet. People were clapping loudly, some with shining eyes, others with stunned expressions. It didn't feel real. The sound of applause rose and echoed around the room, bouncing off the tall walls and lighting her heart in a way she had never felt before. Her breath caught in her throat. For so long she had fought to be heard, to be seen, And now all these people, wealthy guests, respected artists, important figures, were cheering because of her. She felt a rush of emotions flood through her, so strong that she almost forgot to stand up from the bench. When she finally rose, her legs trembled, but she bowed with as much steadiness as she could gather. The applause continued, growing even louder. She looked toward her teacher, who stood near the side of the stage, clapping with a proud smile. Seeing that smile made her heart swell. She had come here unsure of herself, unsure of her place in this world. But now she had proof that her music had reached people in a way she never imagined. After what felt like a long wave of applause, she carefully stepped off the stage. The lights softened and the hall settled again. But the warmth in the room didn't disappear. As she walked back toward her spot near her teacher, people reached out, offering gentle words. Compliments filled the air. That was breathtaking. You play with such deep feeling. I've never heard anything like that. Each voice made her cheeks warm with shy gratitude. She answered softly, thanking them with a small smile. The words felt strange on her tongue, like she wasn't used to receiving so much kindness. But the sincerity in their eyes told her this moment was real. The philanthropist who had invited her approached, their face bright with pride. They placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and told her she had reminded everyone what pure talent and heart looked like. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. She had never been praised in such a grand way before. Soon the performances ended, and the hall shifted into a more relaxed gathering. People stood up, talking among themselves, still carrying that lingering glow from her playing. Some guests approached her again, asking about her background, her training, and how she had learned to play with so much emotion. She answered honestly. She told them about the small music center, the old piano she practiced on, and the way she would sometimes stay after hours just to play in the quiet of the night. She talked about how music helped her through difficult days. She spoke simply without trying to impress anyone. And somehow, that sincerity made people listen even more closely. Her teacher watched nearby, giving her space yet staying close enough to support her if needed. They exchanged a warm glance every few minutes, sharing quiet pride in what had happened. As time passed, a group of organizers invited her to a reserved table. She hesitated at first, unsure if she belonged there, but they encouraged her warmly. When she sat down, she found herself surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to hear her story. They weren't mocking her background or questioning her presence. Instead, they were inspired. One guest asked what her dream was. She paused for a moment. Dreams, for her, had always been fragile things, beautiful but distant. She rarely said them out loud because she feared they might disappear if she did. But tonight felt different. She lifted her eyes and said quietly, I want to become someone who can touch people's hearts with music. I want to keep learning, keep growing, and maybe one day teach others the same way I was taught. The guests nodded thoughtfully. Some even looked emotional. One of them told her that her dream was more meaningful than anything money could buy. She felt a warmth spread across her chest at those words. After a while, the philanthropist invited her and her teacher to a smaller room behind the main hall. It was quieter there, filled with soft lights and decorated with framed photos of past events. They wanted to speak to her privately. She sat down gently, unsure if she had done something wrong, or if there was something serious they wanted to discuss. But the philanthropist's smile eased her fear. They told her they had been moved by her story the moment they first learned about her. They said they believed talent like hers should never go unnoticed, and that her performance tonight had proved just how powerful her gift truly was. Then they shared something unexpected. They wanted to sponsor her education. Not just a few lessons or a short-term program. They wanted to help her attend a respected music academy where she could train professionally. They wanted her to have every opportunity to grow into the musician she dreamed of becoming. Her breath hitched. She blinked rapidly, unsure if she had heard correctly. Her teacher looked equally stunned, covering their mouth with a hand. She tried to speak, but no sound came out at first. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly wiped away. She had never thought someone would go so far for her. She had never expected a chance like this, something she didn't even know she could hope for. She finally whispered, "Are you sure? Someone like me, I don't know if I deserve something so big." The philanthropist leaned forward gently and said, "You deserve it because you've worked for it, because you have something rare, because your music has a soul, and because dreams are not just for the wealthy. They belong to anyone willing to chase them." Her tears spilled over then. She covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Her teacher hugged her softly from the side, whispering how proud they were. The philanthropist didn't rush her. They allowed her to take her time, letting the weight of the moment settle in her heart. When she finally looked up, she smiled. A small, trembling smile, but one full of hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't waste this chance." They nodded warmly, clearly confident she would make the most of it. As they returned to the main hall, the atmosphere still buzzing with excitement, she felt different. Lighter, stronger, as if the world that once seemed locked away was now opening its doors for her. People continued to approach her. Some offered encouragement, others asked for photos, and a few simply wanted to shake her hand. She wasn't used to such attention, but she accepted it with gratitude and humility. Later that night, when the gala finally came to an end, she stepped outside with her teacher. The cool night air brushed against her face, calming her racing thoughts. The city lights glittered all around, and for the first time, she didn't feel small beneath them. She felt like she belonged somewhere in this wide world. She looked up at the sky, thinking of her family waiting at home, thinking of the future she never thought she could reach. Tonight had changed everything. Her life before this moment had been filled with struggle, but her heart had always held on to a small spark of hope. And tonight, that spark had grown into something bright. She held her small purse close and whispered a promise to herself. A promise to work harder, to stay humble, and to let her music reach as many hearts as it could. As she walked down the steps of the grand building, she felt a quiet certainty filling her chest. This was only the beginning of her story, and for the first time, she truly believed that beautiful things could happen to someone like her, too.